Have you ever heard of weak glutes causing low back pain? Or more so, have you ever thought of adding glute strength helping with your back pain? I'm going to go over why your glutes matter so much to your back and how this can help your back pain. Let's pop into it. So when we think of back pain and our back, let's first go over kind of what its job is, because this goes over why our glutes are needed to help support it. So when we have a little person, little nose, little triangle for a nose, we think of our back as more like a rod. Well, in actual reality, our trunk is more like a cylinder. And so we need to act like it's a cylinder versus just a rod. If we treat it like a rod, then that means our back is separate from the front of our body. If you set a rod on the ground and you set a cylinder on the ground, which one's going to be more stable and stand on its own? The cylinder. You can set a can on the table, but you can't stand just a small rod like this and have it stand up there very easily. It's going to fall over. It's going to lack stability. And so when we think of our back in a cylinder, we can have stability with it in our core. You're like, Liz, I asked about glutes, not core. Well, our core is so important for the fact that our glutes are there too. And so what our back does in our core is that it extends our back. It arches it. And so as we think about our body, we have our belly sticking out and our back arches our body, our trunk. If we think about our abdominal muscles, it does the opposite. It slouches our body. It curls us in a C shape the other way. When we put these two together, then we have our core. We have our cylinder. We have our corset, because our abs don't just stay in the front. They actually wrap around our body. They connect into our back and create this strong hold. We also have our pelvic floor, and we have our diaphragm that makes up our bottom cylinder. We have our rib cage and our neck muscles that make up the top cylinder. That includes our shoulder blade muscles in the back. And so when we put all this together, part of what our back does is it extends. Part of what our trunk does is it holds stability with the use of our abs, our core. Well, how our glutes come into this is that if I'm not getting my extension at my hip, right here, if I'm not getting that movement back there, then my back is actually going to take over and it's going to help with the job. Now, our spine is, I kind of like to think about it like a slinky. It's made to move in all sorts of different ways and it can be stable and strong there, but it's not meant to have certain points move as that point of rotation again and again and again. That's when you kink your slinky. When you kink your slinky, then your slinky doesn't go down the stairs as well. It gets stuck, it stops, it doesn't move quite as properly. You get stiff in other areas, you get more mobile in other areas. And so when we act like our back is that point of rotation instead of our hip to get our leg back, then we make this be our point of rotation instead of our hips be the point of rotation. And so if we have weak glutes, then we will add more stress to our back. How we get our glutes to work more and how we stop this is that we stay strong and stable in our cylinder, and then we allow one leg to now move back and extend, moving from the hip. Because our hip now has a stable base to pull from, which is our core, our trunk. In this part, that means that you have stability. Your core makes such a big difference in your glute strength. There's been a couple different studies, and I can link them down below, that show if you are having difficulty accessing and working your glutes, which is basically you're having difficulty making a hip-specific movement, you are counter-loading at and loading your back or your knees instead to make the movement happen, then that means we need to be more solid in our core. It's actually that you need to do what's called a posterior pelvic tilt, or it's that you need to slouch more. It's that you need to engage Get your hips up underneath of you, your pelvis up underneath of you. So then you're less likely to arch your back as you're extending your hip. This makes it more of a hip specific movement instead of a low back specific movement to make your hips actually work. And so what happens is when your back gets tight, it's probably that it's overworking. It's going too much when it comes to this scenario. And so our glutes make up such an important way for us to offload our back, let it have a little bit of a break, let it solidify, let your trunk get stronger, and we get our glutes stronger in that same process. So this helps to offload the back. It gives it stability, it gives it strength. When it comes to us biking, this plays an important role when it comes to us on the saddle when we're climbing, because we don't want to bob and weave and have to move our back every time to counterload what's happening in our hips, because now our base of support is just our core. We don't want to pull on our handlebars too much, but we want to move our legs. We want to have the power to go through the pedal. Where do we get our stability from to push and pull from to make our glutes work with our quads and our calves? Is that we have that core stability. If we don't, then again, we add stress to the low back and we make that low back work harder than what it's supposed to. This can cause kind of a chain reaction, even whenever you're out of the saddle and you're going downhill, is that you lose that stability as well. We tend to squat more and we arch our back to keep our chest up to reach up to the bars. We want to be in a more of a downhill position or deadlift position, enabling you to use your glutes and not just your quads. Because if you see here, more of my quads are going to get loaded in a squat, and more of my glutes are going to get loaded with my core in a deadlift position. And so as we're riding our bike, this trunk stability matters, so you don't end up with a stripper booty or sticking your butt out and arching your back, but we end up with a nice solid base, and we're able to use our legs more with our suspension on the bike. And so as we're talking about glute strength and trunk control, it is important how our core works with our glutes to offload our back. I hope this makes a whole lot of sense. There's a couple exercises that you can trial with this. One of the exercises that I particularly like is a hip hinge. It's where you're doing basically a bridge. The bridge is where you're laying on your back, you raise your hips up, and you lower them down. You can think about doing that posterior pelvic tilt like I just talked about, and that'll make you engage your glutes more. Try it and see how it is to not do that posterior pelvic tilt. You'll probably feel your back working more. This is that exact thing that I'm talking about here, is that if you're on your back and you let your stomach go, you don't control your abs as much, then you're now going to be lifting more from your back with your glutes. But if we do that posterior pelvic tilt, we engage our trunk, we engage that core, and now we can lift through our hips. This makes our glutes work more. Another way that you can tell this is if your hamstrings are working harder in that position than what you think that they should be. If you're not feeling your glutes or you're getting a hamstring cramp. Because if you are getting those, you need to engage those abs a little bit more. Do another little posterior pelvic tilt. Engage it really good. Maybe go a quick breath out. And that'll help you engage those guys to help you do the lifting and make it a hip-specific movement. Another way is to actually do more of a deadlift or a good morning. This makes you have to work harder, and it's even harder to control the trunk and the core. Again, you're not going to feel an intense trunk engagement when you're doing the good morning, but you are going to feel it working. We don't want our core to always be bracing as hard as it possibly can to make our glutes work. No, it needs to meet the demand, the task. We don't want to be like bracing and having this full engagement when I'm going to pick a pencil up from the ground. Maybe if I'm going to move a refrigerator or lift some heavy weights, then I want it on a whole lot harder. I want that trunk engagement. I want that core control so I can make it a hip-specific movement. With the good morning, you can do this and feel that actual hip movement coming in and out. The squat is also a really good one. Yes, I talked about it being more quad specific. It is, but it helps you to control and understand, are you using too much back for this? Or are you staying nice and straight and engaged and straightening this out to be more solid and cylinder-like versus if you were doing more of a back arch support trying to keep your chest up. We want to make sure that you have the trunk control before we worry about keeping your chest up as much. You need more core support if you're not able to keep your chest up as much for your squats. I hope this was helpful in understanding why your glutes are so important for your back and helping to support it and get better from back issues that you may be having. Core strength is so important as a first step for this because then you build on it with glute strength. If you're interested in any programs, if you're a women mountain biker, check out my Red Life team. It's a monthly subscription program that will help you understand what you need to be doing first, second, third to get to be feeling better and stronger on your bike. If you like this video, hit subscribe, give me a like, and put down in the comments what you learned. I always love knowing what people gained and grasped from the video. Bye, y'all.